1939.
1939.
1939.
It's one of the greatest years in film history.
There's no place like home. There's no place.
But we're not going to take a look at any of those films. This video is going to take a look at the not-so-great films of that greatest year. And let me tell you, they run the gamut from bonkers and bananas to downright awful to so bad, they're good. Today, people love to compile lists of the worst of everything, but back in 1939, they didn't because no algorithms. So I had to take matters into my own hands, and I scoured old newspapers, reviews, as well as modern-day classic film blogs and listicles to come up with a selection of the quote-unquote worst films of 1939. If a film title appeared repeatedly or was specifically mentioned as being particularly bad, I added it to my list. From there, I picked a few that I wanted to watch or revisit, just to see if I agreed or disagreed with the reviewer's assessment, and I settled in for what turned out to be a very wild ride. Now remember, gang, this is all subjective. One man's trash is another's treasure, after all. So let's kick things off with MGM's Ice Follies of 1939. Starring Joan Crawford, James Stewart, and Lew Ayres, and directed by Reinhold Schnitzel. I hope I said that right. This is an ice skating film where none of our stars hit the ice. Clearly, MGM saw the money Daryl F. Zanuck was raking in with Sonja Henie and her ice skating rom-com films and said, let's do that. But also at the same time said, let's not do that. And spend a lot more money and adds Technicolor. Stewart and Ayres play popular ice skating duo Hall and Burgess, who are in a bit of a career slump. A slump further exacerbated by Larry's decision to add his girlfriend Mary to the act. Mary is a singer, not a skater. So you can imagine how well that goes over.
But a singer don't belong in an ice skating act. That skating is one form of entertainment and singing is another form.
After they're fired from their latest gig, Larry and Mary elope.
You hold him, I'll tell him.
Eddie, we're married.
You're what?
Married. Us. You married Arizona this morning.
Larry has dreams of producing an elaborate ice show, an Ice Follies, if you will. But the three are broke, but through a very lucky set of coincidences.
Look me up and send me the bill.
Douglas Tolliver, producer, Monarch Studios, Hollywood.
And Mary, knowing how to work reverse psychology.
You wouldn't be interested in a screen test?
No, I wouldn't, Mr. Tolliver.
She gets a contract at Monarch Studios and quickly becomes a rising star renamed Sandra Lee. But she does not read the contract before she signs it, and one of the stipulations is she must be unmarried. Uh-oh. Eddie, he's out of there. He takes off back to the East Coast because three's a crowd, and Larry and Mary settle into a marriage where Mary is the sole breadwinner, and she's so busy with work that she's never at home. For Larry, resentment begins to build. And he takes off to New York City to see if he can find a producer for his grand Ice Follies. Eventually, Mary, missing Larry, renounces her career on a nationwide radio broadcast. It's all very dramatic.
Sandra Lee is as unreal, as untrue, as Cinderella. I'm a woman in love with her husband. And I want to make a home for him. A place to be happy in.
Yay, Mary!
Eddie and Larry become movie producers, and they star Mary in a spectacular Technicolor ice skating extravaganza film where she never ice skates.
But it could have been even better with
your close-up.
No, with me on skates.
Oh, yeah.
The runtime on this film is 82 minutes, and about 30 minutes is straight
ice show featuring skating by the International Ice Follies. Today, they're better known as Disney on Ice. All of this ice show footage worked to the film's advantage, and to be honest, it was about the only thing that worked.
To quote the New York Times in an absolutely brutal review, Ice Follies isn't altogether a spectacle picture. It also has a plot, and one which, if you will excuse our saying so, has been put on ice too late. Far be it for us to wrap one of Mr. Raff's, that's producer, more glittering productions. What we mildly object to is the fact that the glitter does not extend to the dialogue, the incidents, the characters, for whom fictitious is an understatement, or the story. The story is so beyond believable that I find it amazing how committed all three leads are to their roles. They are taking this seriously, which gives the film a kind of weird charm.
No.
I mean, when you've got to say stuff like,
Hall without Burgess. Well, that just don't taste right in my mouth.
either you sell it or you don't.
Ice Follies of 1939 reminded me of how much I like Lou Ayres.
Well, next time you get a chauffeur, why don't you try one that can drive?
Whenever he shows up, there's a charisma he brings, and he has a pretty thankless role, but he plays it with a charm, attitude, and cynicism that I appreciate.
Oh, well, you know how dames are. They get in one of those shops and takes a tow car to get them out.
Ice Follies lost MGM over $300,000 and didn't help Joan beat those box office poison allegations. For me personally, this is the best kind of the worst film. All the silliness is made palatable by the earnest performances of its lead actors. Both James Stewart and Joan Crawford would go on to appear in several 1939 certified classics. Stewart in Destry Rides Again and Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, and Joan Crawford in The Women.
It'll be out tomorrow, Mrs. Prowler.
As you probably predicted, there was no Ice Follies of 1940. Angels Wash Their Faces. Warner Brothers' Angels Wash Their Faces is certified bananas. Starring Ann Sheridan, Ronald Reagan, Frankie Thomas, and the Dead End Kids, this film was initially titled The Battle of City Hall, but was renamed to reference 1938's far superior Angels with Dirty Faces. Besides starring Sheridan and the Dead End Kids, the two films are completely unrelated. Angels Wash Their Faces opens with young Gabe Bryan, played by Frankie Thomas, as he's released from reform school and into the custody of his sister, who's promised to take him away from the tough neighborhood they grew up in. The two end up on Beale Street, and Gabe, who's supposed to keep his nose clean, immediately comes up against the Beale Street termites, aka the Dead End Kids. He also meets Peggy, played by Benita Granville.
Leave this boy alone. He's new and you ought to be nice to him.
Of course, Gabe becomes a termite, and their initiation ritual includes psychological trauma.
Here, give me a match. Match?
They've got the misfortune of doing their initiation rites in a building rigged to go up in flames as part of an elaborate, long-running insurance scam. The boys put out the fire, but Gabe, with his rap sheet, becomes a convenient scapegoat. Ronald Reagan appears on the scene as an assistant district attorney to check up on Gabe, but he immediately falls for Ann Sheridan's "it's all fun and crazy and Dead End Kids" games until the film takes a very, very dark turn. Another building goes up in flames, and this time a member of the gang, Sleepy, you may also know him from other films in the Warner Brothers DECU, Dead End Cinematic Universe, as Milty, Fats, Ape, Dutch, and Hunky, has the absolutely worst luck in being stuck in bed with a broken leg. The kids attempt to save their friend and watch as he goes up in flames. Gabe is arrested and tried for arson and murder. It's pretty disturbing to watch all these corrupt adults railroad this poor teenage boy into prison. Also, there's this teacher.
If I studied extra hard, night and day.
That's something you don't know how to do and probably never will. I don't think you ever had a better average than B-.
Yeah, go ahead, be my guest. In order to free Gabe,
When was the Constitution written?
the kids learn all about civics,
When was the Declaration of Independence signed?
assault their classmates. Billy wins a contest to be the honorary mayor, which, I kid you not, ends up making him the de facto mayor. Ronald Reagan commits a multitude of constitutional violations.
If I should happen to get hold of a certain account book, it might prove that he's a crook.
The termites conduct a reign of terror on their town, and revive Puritan corporal punishment. It's so crazy, and just when you think it can't get any more outrageous, screenwriters Michael Fessier, Niven Bush, and Robert Buckner up the madness.
In a letter to the New York Daily News, one Joseph Booker felt he should offer an alternative to the mini Best Picture list. He wrote, "Everybody this time of year picks 10 best pictures of the year. Here's a novelty, folks. Here's my 10 worst pictures of 1939, and I defy anyone to improve on them." Included on that list with Angels Wash Their Faces was also Dead End Kids on Dress Parade and They Made Me a Criminal, starring John Garfield and the Dead End Kids. Well, I think we are all very clear on what Mr. Booker does not like. Personally, I just don't think Mr. Booker has an appreciation of things that are completely off the rails.
The New York Times Review offered its astute assessment.
Angels Wash Their Faces, which represents an advance, although not necessarily progress, for the group of quaintly gifted urchins known as the Dead End Kids. Before the smoke is cleared, they have permanently put an end to crime, exposed the crooked politicians, and happily married off Miss Sheridan to the district attorney's handsome son. If that doesn't tell you all you want to know about it, we will casually mention that, susceptible as we are to oomph, in Miss Sheridan's case, oomph is not enough.
Variety was dead on in saying newest dead-end melodramatic adventure sacrifices plausibility for action. But director Ray Enright's terrific Meller pace makes it the sort of fare the average audience will eat up. Me, I'm the average audience. I suspended all disbelief, and I ate it up.
Come on, gang, let's go.
The rains came. I was pretty surprised to see 20th Century Fox's The Rains Came on the Harvard Lampoon's list of 10 worst movies of 1939. After all, it did win the first Best Visual Effects Academy Award.
To Fred Serson for the special photographic effects, The Rains Came.
And was one of the top grossing films of the year. Plus, it stars OG channel favorite Tyrone Power. But being honest, after a rewatch of this disaster drama directed by MGM's Clarence Brown, based on the best-selling novel by Louis Bromfield, I have to say the best part of this film was the disaster sequence. There's an earthquake, a flood, a dam fails, buildings collapse, and then a plague of typhoid hits. That's where all the excitement was.
The love stories were tepid at best and unbelievable at worst. It really felt like Myrna Loy was calling in this performance.
And the Maharaja has promised me my choice of horses. I wonder if he'd mind if I also chose my escort.
She's supposed to be this restless and self-indulgent socialite who falls for the noble Major Ramasafti played by Tyrone Power. But I'm just not feeling it.
She is a bad woman, isn't she?
George Brent, never one to inspire any passionate response from me, plays a bad boy painter who has left his life of privilege in England behind to live and work in India. He's also Myrna Loy's former lover, and he's best friends with Tyrone Power. He finds himself falling for Brenda Joyce's naive to the point of ridiculous Fern.
I've watched you from my window every time you've come to the Smileys.
None of these relationships feel like they have an arc. None of the drama outside of the disaster scenes have any real weight. Characters, plot lines, and relationships are undeveloped. However, Clarence Brown's direction and the cinematography by Arthur Miller is beautiful. Unfortunately, the shallow screenplay just lets everyone down.
The Brooklyn Daily Eagle rightly noted that in the transition from page to screen, The Rains Came lost a lot of its significance. At the heart of Bromfield's book was a real examination of the material conditions, the rot of colonialism, and an analysis of the societal ills of the nation. Of all that is missing from the film, besides casting any real Indians, it became, to quote Herbert Cohn, primarily a romance with a tragic twist and spectacle. When stacked against some of the year's other action romance films like Drums Along the Mohawk and Dodge City, you can really see the weaknesses in The Rains Came. Brent, well, he would go on and appear in another 1939 hit, Dark Victory. Idiot's Delight. Oh, poor Clarence Brown, he's back. And this time, it's MGM's Idiot's Delight. Based on the Pulitzer Prize-winning play by Robert E. Sherwood, starring Clark Gable, Norma Shearer, and Edward Arnold, Idiot's Delight is another example of a film directed by Clarence Brown, neutering the very strong social message of its source material. So I've had a copy of this play sitting on my bookshelf for years. I finally picked it up and read it for the first time. And as a play, Idiot's Delight is a sharp, cynical satire that blends comedy, romance, and political commentary.
Set in an alpine hotel in an unspecified country, as the outbreak of another European war looms large, the plots and subplots of the story revolve around a diverse group of international characters. Idiot's Delight confronts its main themes of war, nationalism, and human folly, all while poking fun at the absurdity of international politics. The film adaptation, however, removes most of the dark humor present in the play. It also adds in a 30-minute prologue chronicling the career struggles of Clark Gable's Harry Van.
So you went into a speakeasy and told the man you wanted a cocktail, did you?
Before he ends up in that European hotel with his gaggle of chorus girls. I like Gable in this. His famous magnetism is on full display.
You like my electrical personality,
He's charming, he's got a wicked little glit in his eye, he's the con man who just can't seem to get the cons right.
Although the Lampoon also considered Idiot's Delight one of the worst of the year,
I have to tell you, this isn't a bad movie. And of all the films on this list, it is the most disappointing because I think with a few changes and tweaks, this could have been a great movie. If MGM had not shied away from the more overtly political aspects of the story, I mean, that was not going to happen. The Philadelphia Inquirer felt the film lost its edge over the play because its sharp-tongued speeches were deleted or entirely cut to ribbons. And then, of course, there's Norma Shearer, playing the maybe she is, maybe she isn't Russian Countess Irene. The Lampoon awarded her the Worst Actress of the Year for this film. I think I actually forgot to tell you that they gave the Worst Actor award to Tyrone Power for The Rains Came. I often find Shearer's acting to be too mannered
and lacking in seeming spontaneity.
The fact that she has some very long monologues and speeches in this film only reinforces that opinion.
After the first exhilaration, there comes a depressive reaction.
She has a lot to do in the role of Irene. She has to be a believable big liar, but she also has to be charming. To quote Graham Greene's review in The Spectator, Mr. Gable does his best, but Miss Norma Shearer adds to the heavy, heavy saturation of the weight of a far too powerful personality. Overacting could hardly go further. And yes, he's right. She overacts the hell out of this movie.
I can imagine how thrilling it must be in Paris at this moment. Just like 1914. All the lovely soldiers. Here we are, on a mountain peak in Bedlam. Tonight, war is breaking over the world.
And to be honest, I kept wishing Irene was played by Irene Dunne. Gable's performance as Harry Van
would somewhat fade into obscurity, but his appearance in another 1939 film, maybe you've heard of it, would forever cement his title as the King of Hollywood.
Of course, Norma would redeem herself with her performance in The Women, one of the best films of 1939, and Idiot's Delight will always have the distinction of being the only film featuring Clark Gable as a song and dance man. Hotel for Women. Specifically mentioned by one William Ryan in his Greenwich Daily Item column called Greenwich Gleanings, where he wrote that he didn't need to list the 10 worst movies of the year because he firmly believed 20th Century Fox's Hotel for Women by itself was the 10 worst movies of the year. Starring Linda Darnell in her screen debut, Ann Sothern and James Ellison, Darnell, who is just 15, I might add, plays Marcia Bromley, a young woman who travels from Syracuse to New York in an effort to rekindle a romance with her college boyfriend, Jeff, played by Ellison. While in New York, she takes up residence at the Sheraton Hotel for Women and very quickly realizes that Jeff has moved on.
Because I still loved you, you'd still love me. It would never dawn on me that you might have changed.
But instead of heading back to Syracuse, Marcia takes some very wise advice and decides to stay in town and enjoy a taste of New York City. in very quick succession and just as unbelievably a la Mary in Ice Follies.
Well, if the camera sees you as we do, the whole world will be smoking Cambridge cigarettes.
Marcia becomes an in-demand fashion model, a popular society fixture, and then a murder suspect. Yes, this film also takes a very strange turn. Directed by Gregory Ratop with a screenplay by Elsa Maxwell, Catherine Scola, and Daryl Ware, Hotel for Women is basically a conventional romantic drama that gets most of its bonus points from Ann Sothern.
Goodbye, Fernando.
Interestingly, I couldn't find anyone who was as aggressively anti-Hotel for Women as Greenwich's William Ryan. Personally, I struggle to stay interested in the story, but I do think a drama of young women on their own striking out in the big city had a lot more potential. Linda Darnell, you can tell just how young she is and how inexperienced she is, especially when stacked up against a veteran like Ann Sothern. Casper Monahan, writing in the Pittsburgh Press, sums up my sentiments. Amusing as it goes along is to be seen and then forgotten speedily. So what was my takeaway from watching this handful of films, all of them unlucky enough to garner some pretty bad reviews in a year of greatness? Personally, I was able to find something enjoyable in all of them, from the special effects and The Rains Came to the just bonkers, off-the-wall plotting of Angels Wash Their Faces and the very earnest performances in Ice Follies of 1939. Would I recommend any of these films? Not to someone who is new to classic films. There's an immense catalog of better films to enjoy. There's no need to start here. But for those of you who are a filmography completionist or a special effects enthusiast or fans of the stars of these films, then go ahead, check them out. You could be very disappointed or pleasantly surprised. There are 8 million stories in the cinema cities. This has been One.